Is your team not performing well? Is morale low and turnover high? Are you falling further behind the competition? I'm here to help. I'm Shani Magoski, and this is the Leadershifter Show, where business strategy and culture finally meet. Explore shifts of all kinds required to build cultures of trust, engagement, and execution excellence. I promise I am not your typical boring leadership consultant, and I will help you and your team get your shift together.
Hello, Leadershifters, and welcome to another edition of the Leadershifter Show with yours truly, me, Shani. Today is, I'm not going to say a first, but it's a rare thing when I have a guest who's going to speak about a topic that I don't know very much about. I know that might sound immodest, but as you know, I have lots of fellow leadership coaches, consultants, and other kind of gurus in this space on. And, typically we share a lot of this same approaches and overlap with clients and so forth. So our guest today, Yosi Amram, is joining us from the San Francisco Bay Area. And the concept we're going to talk about today is spiritual intelligence. I'm sure everybody's heard of emotional intelligence, of course. Well, this is the next natural progression. And lest you think that Yosi has just come from, a background where he sat under a tree meditating for his whole life, you couldn't be more mistaken. You are looking or listening to, folks, a former Israeli IDF soldier and a Harvard MBA. Okay. So I want you to take what he has to say very seriously. I know I will. So Yosi, welcome to the show.
Thank you for highlighting those 2 points in my career, my life.
Well, I love the yin and yang of it. That's part of it, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. We want to make sure that everything we're talking about is grounded in reality and practical. So business, leadership, and those things. It's not, and spiritual, not just kind of esoteric. That's one of the issues is, before emotional intelligence, and you've drawn the analogy, came into the forefront of our understanding in culture, we used to think, somebody is emotional or somebody is reasonable. If you did a reference call on somebody and the person said, so-and-so is emotional, you would think, oh my God, I don't know that I want them on my team. But then there's emotional intelligence that bridge the gap between emotional and reasonable. Now, in our culture, there's a similar dichotomy between the spiritual and the practical. We think of the spiritual as very esoteric, woo-woo, maybe you believe in afterlife, the soul, heaven, hell, I don't know, whatever the spiritual belief one can have. But that's not what spiritual intelligence is, and I'll talk some more about that. It's very analogous to emotional intelligence, but it is very practical, and if it's not practical, then there's no intelligence to it. So,
Well, it's a perfect lead-in to the obvious question, what is spiritual intelligence?
Okay, great. So just drawing on the analogy again that you started with emotional intelligence, what is emotional intelligence? It's the ability to draw on emotional resources and information to help manage our own and others' emotions. Similarly, spiritual intelligence is the ability to draw on spiritual resources and qualities and embody them in daily life to enhance our functioning and well-being. So what would those be? These are qualities that have been hailed by all the world's wisdom and spiritual traditions like purpose, service, gratitude, beauty, joy, integrity, humility, presence, and so on. And these are qualities that now in the field of positive psychology are studied and have shown to help our well-being. And similarly, in the fields of leadership development, qualities of servant leadership, strong purpose, vision, gratitude, humility have been studied. And there was a study by Bain & Company, one of the top international business strategy consulting firms, and they surveyed thousands of employees across many companies and looked at what are the qualities that provide for inspired leadership, that inspire others. When employees are inspired, they're twice as productive. And what they found is that being servant-oriented, being centered, being purposeful, being humble, are all the qualities that people are drawn to and find inspiring in a leader. And then that results in improved performance in the team. So I could talk some on and on. I mean, my own dissertation research was looking at 42 CEOs and 210 members of their staff. And leaders that had higher spiritual intelligence led teams that had greater commitment, higher morale, and lower turnover. Follow-on research showed that such leaders produce better financial results for their organizations. So this is now scientifically studied and validated and is proven to produce better outcomes, both for the individual in terms of their happiness, quality of life, and then the performance of their teams and their organizations.
So for those of you who are listening who are like, oh, I don't know, spiritual intelligence sounds a little bit too right brain for me. Hopefully, Yosi's left brain explanation about what this does for leadership effectiveness and business results will reel you in just a little bit here. So, Yosi, take us on your journey. As I mentioned in the introduction, you're Israeli, which means mandatorily you had to serve in the IDF, which you did. So take us through that and the impact that it had on you and your journey through finding yourself, taking a new path, and ultimately coining this phrase, which, by the way, is really cool. It's rare that you get to coin anything anymore, right? It seems like it's all coined already.
Yeah, well, just to be humble and truthful, I did not coin the term spiritual intelligence.
Oh.
Actually, it's okay. Thank you, though. It was coined by a woman called Dana Zohar in a book that she wrote actually in 1997 called Rewiring the Corporate Brain, but she did not define it and operationalize it and develop a method to measure it, which I set on to do academically and created the first validated psychometrically sound measure of spiritual intelligence that since has been translated and validated by other researchers, and my research received over 1,000 academic citations. But anyway, I'm sorry, it's a bit of a tangent, which relates to, but let's go back to where you said. So I grew up in Israel, like good Israeli citizen, the man. I was drafted at age 18. Fortunately, it was a peaceful period in Israel's history, rare, especially with what's going on in the world now. But I was a shy, introverted kid, and I was surprised that when I went into the military, all of a sudden I found myself in these leadership positions, and I won all these awards, had the fastest promotion record in the history of my regiment, and so on. But something about the command and control model of the military chafed at my soul, and I resolved to someday try and organize people and lead them based on more humane principles that support their individual growth and development in a community, in a team context. And the command and control model is very effective for the military and necessary when you're in battle. You don't have time to build consensus and get around the table and talk about how should we do this and that. So you have to have sort of clear lines of hierarchy and communication. Sure. But, in our new modern world, where more and more of us are what's called knowledge workers, we're not assembly line. On the assembly line, you could, even in industrial economy and an assembly line, you could use sort of a command and control model, and you could define the jobs and tell people exactly what to do and in what order. But, more and more people are, what's called knowledge workers. And now, especially with the AI coming online, what we need is discernment and judgment and initiative and creativity. And those things don't flourish in a command and control environment. So anyway, back to my story. So I resolved to try and build an organization based on more humane principles. So after the military, I came to the U.S. I studied engineering at MIT. I thought I would be an inventor, and that would be my path to entrepreneurship. I quickly discovered that even though I was pretty good engineering-wise, I really liked to interact with people. And my path to entrepreneurship was through business. So indeed, I went to Harvard, got my MBA. Long story short, I started a couple of companies. The first company was called Individual Inc., and it was the first company that did personal newspapers. So you would get Cheney's morning newspaper on your fax machine in the late 80s. I don't know how many people remember or know about fax machine these days, but it was a personalized newspaper, individualized to each.
You were doing curation before they had a name for it.
Yeah, but it was all done with software, machine learning software that scans all the wire services and databases and delivered you the news articles that were most relevant to you. And you would rate the article as relevant or not, and then it would learn about you and keep tuning your profile. So that started on fax, then went to email, then went to internet. And I was working 70, 80 hours a week and really committed and driven. But I got burnt out at some level, and I was starting to get depressed and so on. And then the internet boom happened. We rode that wave, and the company went public. And I was worth tens of millions of dollars. But somehow, some part of me just kind of, even though I was wealthy and physically healthy, something in me just wasn't content and fulfilled. And I experienced sort of a dark night of the soul, what's called in the spiritual traditions. It was kind of a mixture of depression and meaninglessness. But strangely, out of that, I had a spiritual awakening and what's called a spiritual emergency, where my egoic boundaries dissolved and I experienced sort of the oneness and interconnectedness of everything. And it was a powerful experience and very exuberant, euphoric, which actually resulted in a manic episode and which kind of blew my circuits, this intensity of this energy and the insight. And I was the CEO of a public company, but I was having all these downloads of where the internet was going and where companies in the future like Facebook and Google, this was well before those companies were started. And I was trying to do all these initiatives and I was just running way ahead, but my team and my board couldn't really understand. I was very ungrounded. So that led to them putting me on a leave of absence and ultimately pushing me out of the company. It was very traumatic because my company was my baby. It was sort of the essence of what my life was going to be about. So I was devastated. And then through that and trying to understand what that was about, why my personality and identity was so tied to it, and ultimately changed the direction of my life, where I went back and got a PhD in psychology. And became a clinical psychologist. And that's when I heard the term spiritual intelligence. I knew about emotional intelligence. And I wanted to see, I thought it would be very interesting and analogous to study spiritual intelligence, but it wasn't well defined. It wasn't the way to measure it. So that's the research I set on to do for my doctorate. And I developed a model of spiritual intelligence that's ecumenical, meaning that regardless of whether you're Jewish or Muslim or Christian or Buddhist or Hindu, the virtues I talked about, like purpose and service and gratitude and humility and integrity, are common across all the world's traditions. And these are qualities that we find as virtues in modern psychology. So even atheists, and many of my clients are atheists, they don't care so much about spiritual intelligence. Even the word, some of them find problematic. They're not spiritual, like you're saying. But when they connect with their life force, when they connect with their essence of who they are and find their unique gifts and want to express them in service and contribute, they find they're more centered, they're more grounded, they're more powerful. And all these qualities of spiritual intelligence start to develop. And then they are more confident and more powerful. They're inspired. And then they're more inspiring and their life is more fulfilling. So a lot of my clients can be atheists, but they could still cultivate these qualities and see the impact.
As you were talking, a few questions entered my mind. And if they entered my mind, I'm pretty sure they entered someone else's mind who were listening or watching. Your spiritual awakening. If this is true, you don't have to admit to it. Did it involve ayahuasca or something similar? Or was it just like this crazy random download, like you called it? Because I think the context for it is a super interesting thing to understand.
No, I didn't have to ayahuasca, but I was at the time taking some actually antidepressants to deal with the depression that I was having. And what was happening, my mom passed away during my IPO roadshow, which was very intense. I didn't have the time to process the grief. And but it was through that grief and sort of the surrendering to the grief. And then I was also reading all these books about consciousness and the unification between physics and information theory. And somehow, actually, I was lying on a massage table. I was totally relaxed, and I was opening my eyes, and I was like, "Wow!" The floor looked like and sensed like it was within me. And it just came to me that everything is made of consciousness. Everything is made of awareness. And there's no barrier separation. Everything is interconnected, as they say. So it was kind of, I don't know how to explain it. This is like why I went and studied transpersonal psychology to try and understand, was this real? Is this just crazy making? What was this about? And so that kind of was a profound experience that I had to understand, and I can't fully understand it, but it is not understood in the literature that a lot of people experience these spiritual emergencies and awakenings, and they can happen spontaneously. They can happen with medicines and all kinds of drugs and ayahuascas. But the thing is, if you can have an awakening during meditation, or you can experience oneness, you can walk in the forest, you can do an ayahuasca journey and have these insights. But to me, it's less interesting, these awakening moments. It's like how we integrate it. And this is the difference between spiritual intelligence and a spiritual experience. I can have an experience of oneness and while meditating or an ayahuasca journey, but then, how do I behave when I'm driving in the freeway and people are cutting me off, and I'm in the line in the supermarket and the person in front of me can't find their wallet, and I'm running late, and, all these things that they're guilty. Yeah, so am I. So it's just like, it's not about an experience. It's about, cultivating these qualities. And yeah, that experience and those insights are important, and shifting our identity from I'm a separate, self, like a skin encapsulated ego, as they call it, that looks at the world in a dog-eat-dog world, and we're all competing and so on. And that sets a certain orientation. So, but when I understand that we are interconnected, and it's so crucial for our understanding now, when you look around the world after the pandemic, environmental issues, wars, this polarization, we're in this together. So we have to shift the way we relate to ourselves and our relationship to the world, and then cultivate these virtues, which have, as I said, hailed by all the world's traditions, regardless of their cosmology. So whether you believe Jesus, was the Son of God and is the Messiah, or the Buddha was enlightened, or Muhammad was the, final prophet, or, Moses received the Torah on Mount Sinai, whatever these theologies and metaphysical views are, they're all saying, no, practice forgiveness, practice compassion, have a purpose, try to contribute, live with integrity, live with humility. And now modern psychology says, yeah, if you have a sense of purpose, your life has more meaning and more contentment. And if you practice gratitude, you're better off. And if you practice forgiveness and compassion, then you're more connected, you're less lonely.
Maybe an unfair question for you. No pun intended, but most of the time, you're preaching to the choir, right? And people who get this, and they want it. How do you reach the people who don't want to know from it, who are brainwashed, warmongers, confrontational, whether it's like full on egregious wars that we're seeing around the world, or just like stubbornness, refusal to see other people's point of view. I mean, it runs the gamut. So how do you infiltrate that?
Yeah, it's a great question. That's a life journey, and we're all in this together. But my experience is that when people connect to themselves and they notice like what happens to their experience when they live in this outlook of dog eat dog world, they feel lonely, they feel constricted, their health suffers. All the longest running happiness wellness study is a cohort of people from Harvard over 80 years, and it shows that the quality of human relationships is important to our health and longevity and happiness more than anything else. The Surgeon General just recently announced that we're living in a pandemic of loneliness. And for most people, work is our primary community. That's where we interact with people. We spend the bulk of our waking hours, and more people are single adult households, and more children are being raised by a single parent. So, people are feeling the impact of this disconnection and this polarization and all these things, and it's affecting our bodies, affecting our health. So the way I try to get to people is just get them to pay attention to what's happening in their hearts and what's happening in their bodies when they hold certain beliefs and behave and interact with the world in a certain way. And, it's one thing at a time. It's small.
Be the change you want to see.
Exactly.
To quote a spiritual guru.
Yeah, Gandhi. Yeah. If we transmit a certain vibration and embody certain qualities, then I think people are naturally drawn to us. And that's why these leaders that embody these qualities are drawing people to them. They're more inspiring, yes, and their teams are more productive. So they don't have to get on the soapbox and lecture about spiritual intelligence. They just are
it. Yeah.
They are it. They are embodying a sense of purpose. They have a vision that inspires people. They have a sense of purpose they're devoted to. It's not about their ego. And then people are drawn to them, and they seem like, oh, I'm drawn to work with this person because they have a compelling vision. They appreciate my work. They express gratitude. They bring joy. They help find the beauty in what we're doing. And it's not just kill the competition or, maximize profit. The research shows that companies that take a multi-stakeholder approach actually produce better shareholder returns than those that are just trying to maximize short-term profits.
A few sentences ago, you used the word vibration. And again, for people who wouldn't subscribe to being described as spiritual, the word vibration can conjure up, like some woo-woo-ness in them. But you and I know, and other people who do subscribe to spirituality know that vibration is an accurate term because we're all just energy. And like vibration is an actual metaphysical thing. Now, here's where I'm going to pass the baton to you because I didn't study this. I would love for you to explain that concept in a more knowledgeable way.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for highlighting that. So, yes. So, vibration, frequency, energy may sound woo-woo, but the science now understands one is human beings are connected through something called mirror neurons. So when you was in the presence of somebody, and this happens even at monkeys and other mammals, when we watch another person of our species having an experience, the same neural pathways in our brain get activated. We don't really understand exactly how that is, but we all have the experience of walking into a house or into a room, and without any word being said, or we're looking at someone and the place feels heavy, the person is sad or whatever, or they're joyful and the place feels bright and light and whatever, and you could feel it, and someone is angry. So we also know that emotions are contagious, and the mirror neurons are sort of a mechanism that we believe that scientifically now has been proven to support that. Now, there's also research in a place called the HeartMath Institute that has looked at, the electromagnetic field. So, our brain works on electricity. Neurons fire based on a difference in the electric charge. That's what neural firing is. And so, and the nervous system is all based on electrical current. So around our body, there's an electromagnetic field. And what the HeartMath Institute has studied is the effect and what happens when two people are within, 6-10 feet of some proximity, their electromagnetic fields start to interact. And that could be one of the ways in which we affect each other through these electromagnetic fields. So when we say vibration or energy, these are some of the mechanisms, the mirror neurons that happen, and these electromagnetic fields. Now, we also all feel when we love someone, there has a certain energy, or when someone else loves us, we experience it. It's hard to exactly know what is the mechanism, but you feel the energy coming at you when someone looks at you with the eyes of love. There's a certain frequency for their energy, we could say. Now, we don't know how to measure it exactly with an instrument, but again, there's a lot of science that supports.
At one point, there wasn't an instrument to measure the frequency of light waves that we interpret as Roy G. Biv, right? Then there was. I bet that sooner rather than later, there will be a way to calibrate that.
Yeah, well, as you point out, I mean, the universe, the dark sky at night is full of electromagnetic radiation, or they talk about the background wave through which they studied the Big Bang. Now, human eye can only see a very narrow bandwidth of the frequency domain from, the color of purple to so on, the red across. But, different mammals experience a broader range of frequencies. And with certain instruments, we could see gamma rays and X-rays, but they're all frequencies, electromagnetic frequencies. And just, do we have the instrumentation and would they not know that birds actually navigate by tuning into certain frequencies and that's how they know how to migrate during the season. So they've discovered that birds can tune into these frequency domains that we don't as humans know. We need instruments, but birds do that, and they use that for navigation. So we probably in our body, in our psyche, have these tuning mechanism to other frequencies that we don't really know. Like until we discovered the mirror neurons, it was mysterious how we have these empathic responses.
Typically, functional MRIs can pick up on this stuff, right? You expose someone to a stimulus and a certain part of the brain lights up. So you do a fMRI when near someone who's a loved one, and you can see that energetic space in the brain light up versus a situation that makes the person uncomfortable. So I guess my point is, we are starting to calibrate it, just not, with like a spectrometer, something easy.
Yeah. No, but there's more and more research to understand consciousness and how we influence each other and how these layers of interconnectivity among us that we could feel emotionally are there. And, people speak about company culture, right? I mean, certain companies have a culture that's more joyful. Other places are more driven or frugal or whatever. And there's when you walk into a space in a company, I think most of us could feel the energy, and it just hits us.
Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that, because culture and almost anything I talk about with my guests on the podcast somehow supports healthy corporate culture. So I appreciate that you mentioned that. I want to go back to measurement. You've got an assessment, a spiritual assessment, a spiritual intelligence assessment. Tell us how we can find that.
Yeah, well, I have a website called Intelligensi.com. It's the word intelligence, except instead of CE at the end, it's SI for spiritual intelligence. And if you go there, there's a free assessment for spiritual intelligence that gives you your profile of strengths and opportunities to grow. So it's not trying to, we don't want to get our egos and things like, how do I compare to other? It's normalizing everybody against themselves. So somebody may score really high on mindfulness. Someone else may score high on purpose. Someone else. So, relative to themselves. So it just gives the person their profile. And then there's, also a paid assessment and a 360 assessment. They go into more detail. So with the 360, you could do a self-assessment and you can ask your colleagues at work to rate you or family members if you're brave enough. And you could see whether you think, oh, I'm a joyful, compassionate person. Those are my strengths. And you could see whether people around you feel that those are your strengths or not. Or you might think, I'm not so great at this. But others may think, no, those are your strengths. So you might discover some pleasant surprises. You might discover some yellow warning flags that the way you perceive yourself is not the same as others. And so there's the spiritual intelligence, and then there's a spiritually intelligent leadership, which takes that into the domain of leadership specifically with a couple of other qualities and specifically focusing, looking at it through the lens of leadership, but still with the same basic spiritual intelligence qualities. So yeah, there's people can get assessed if they're curious, and there's a free assessment and there's some paid assessments.
Well, and if you want to know a lot more about spiritually intelligent leadership, I would love to mention your book, Spiritually Intelligent Leadership: How to Inspire by Being Inspired, very recently published. Yes.
Yes, yeah. So the whole theme of the book is that what is leadership? A lot of leadership is about inspiration. That's what differentiates a leader from a manager. A manager makes decisions, allocates resources, but leaders inspire. And the word inspire, what does it mean? It comes from the root of spirit, right? And the root spirit comes from Latin as the animating life force. So basically, leaders animate their organization with the life force. And how do they do that? By setting a vision, having a sense of purpose or a mission of and a set of values that bring people together that want to work towards those values or that vision or that mission. So leaders are basically invigorating their organization with that life force, and that's what could be an inspiring leader. But, most people want to become more inspiring. But when we say I want to be a more inspiring leader, I can't judge that. I have to look at others and see, am I inspiring to them? So that's in effect disempowering to say I want to be an inspiring leader. We have to understand what's the cause and what's the effect. The cause is getting inspired. When we're inspired, then we can inspire. Then we are passionate about our vision, about our mission. We're engaged, we're committed, we're driven, and that's what draws others to us. So the whole theme of the book is how to get inspired, how to develop these qualities of spiritual intelligence so that you live an inspired, empowered life and discover your unique, authentic gifts and sense of purpose and your vision for yourself and your organization, and then draws others to you. And then you feel this sense of community where people are sharing this intention, and the power multiplies when you have a group of people that are committed to the same vision and mission versus just one person.
Well, selfishly speaking, on behalf of me and other people who do coaching and leadership development, is there an opportunity to get certified in your assessments, specifically the 360s?
Yeah, actually, we're gonna run a coach certification training starting in September. So yeah, people can on the Intelligensi website, you'll see a list of certified coaches that are trained in this assessment and in this model and can work with people. So anybody who wants to get certified, please go to the website and reach out, and
Okay. now I know what my professional development goal is this year, to get certified in your methodology. I always have to have something. That's among my many purposes, is to be a lifelong learner. So
Yeah, that's
I'm
beautiful.
glad I asked.
That's beautiful. Thank you. That was a plug for me. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Unintentionally, actually. Like I said, I preface it by saying, from a selfish perspective.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. It's wonderful you're on a journey of improving. As a friend of mine, Chip Conley, says, it's better to be improving than proving. We're less concerned about proving ourselves as much as concerned about improving ourselves. So
So
less
true.
about our ego proving itself, but a life of growth, and that's where the fulfillment comes and the joy. Children are naturally born joyful because they're interested in growth and learning and curious, and so
That's right. So, and back to the aspect of service, I was also impressed to read in my preparation for the podcast today that you have started two nonprofits. One is called truemasculinity.org, and the other one is engenderinglove.org. Love to hear more.
Okay. Well, True Masculinity was born out of my own pain and the pain that I see many of my male clients, where, with Me Too and other movements, it's become so clear that men have caused so much violence, sexual and otherwise, and in the world. And men that are sensitive, that want to lead compassionate, ethical lives, are wondering, what is a healthy view of masculinity, and how do I hold my manhood with dignity as opposed to shame? So I think a lot of men are in search of what is healthy masculinity. So that was what that project was about. And there's some essays and a sense of community, and directory of men's groups and stuff like that. So and then the other one is Engendering Love, that you mentioned, is related. It's a play on the word gender and engendering love. So there's so much related to the thing I talked about, masculinity. There's so much confusion about gender in our world these days. And, traditional gender stereotypes are falling apart. Women, are taking leadership positions and don't want to just be subservient at home and so on. And then people are like, I don't want to be falling into this binary. Either I'm masculine and I'm aggressive and I'm strong, or I'm feminine and I'm receptive and I'm nurturing. There's fluidity. So, and there's so much acrimony and confusion. And so the idea was, we created a summit and invited all these speakers and panels to look at issues on gender, so people can relate and understand what is the beauty and joy of each gender, and what is the pain and suffering. And we might think, oh, it's so great to be a man, or it's so great to be this, that, or the other. But when you listen, there's a lot of pain.
Sounds like a really well-needed application of spiritual intelligence, because, as you say, there is a lot of confusion and ambivalence and judgment in that space right now. So
lack of empathy and lack of empathy and lack of self-acceptance and acceptance of others. So actually, we had a very powerful summit with strong speakers and keynotes, people like Alanis Morissette, and there are recordings of those sessions. There were experiential sessions about healing the father wound, and all how to live with greater self-love and more sovereignty around our gender, and panels of experts and panels of users. So a lot of these recordings are available on the website. So
that sounds amazing. All right. It sounds like I'm going to be spending quite a lot of time on your website, looking at the certification,
that's Engendering Love
assessment, looking at the recordings.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to block an afternoon.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Well, so any last words of wisdom or advice for our listeners and viewers?
Well, my last words would be that this is a lifelong journey as you talked about, of improvement. My recommendation is to take any of these qualities. If you buy my book, then each chapter looks at a quality. It has relatable case studies, has exercises, and spiritual intelligence is not cognitive. So it's not just about reading the book. It's about doing the exercises and bringing the practice. So my recommendation is people pick a quality and work on that for a month and build the habits of, whether it's a gratitude practice, getting in the habit of doing that daily, or want to cultivate beauty and just practicing opening our eyes to see the beauty that's already around us throughout the day in our work, in our life, everywhere we go. So it's a journey, picking one quality at a time, work on it, have patience with ourselves. So, we fall off the horse, 7 times, get back on 8. And as they say, and there are different versions of the saying. So, yeah.
This is such important work. Thank you for being a pioneer in the field of spiritual intelligence and for putting a roadmap out there in the form of your book and putting some quantification around it in the form of the assessment and putting some empirical research around it in the form of your PhD and subsequent work. Really, really, lots of gratitude for that, because the world certainly needs more than we have right now. How can people reach you if they want to know more? Just tell us your website one more time.
It's YosiAmram.net. YOSI is the first name. Last name is Amram, AMRAM. Adam, Mary, Robert, Adam, Mary. So YosiAmram.net. And that has links to all these assessment website, the Engendering Love website, the True Masculinity website. So yeah, all these resources, my coaching website, my psychotherapy website.
You have lots of free time on your hands, obviously.
Well, I'm privileged. I have a lot of passions and I do the work I'm interested in, and it's meaningful, and I connect with great people, my clients and people like yourself. I mean, I'm so honored and delighted and appreciate your kind words and support. And we're in this together. I mean, none of us can do this. So we need all of us to do our part. And I think for humanity to make it through this existential crises that we're facing, we have to come together and address these deep existential human problems that have been with us for millennia.
Amen and namaste to that.
Namaste to you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This was delightful and very informative. Really appreciate it. And Leader Shifters, as always, thanks for watching or listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Go to theleadershipproject.com to sign up for the Scoop newsletter and explore all the resources from this podcast in the show notes. And follow me on Instagram at The Leadership Project and LinkedIn under my name, Shani Magoski, for inspiration and content about all things leadership. Make it a great day.